Hey everyone, my name is Nicole.
And I'm Sim.
I'm Shanna.
I'm Mia.
I'm Bethany.
Welcome to our
CultureCast. To start, I'm going to talk about the playwright himself, Heinrik Ibsen. He was a 19th century Norwegian playwright who believed that husband and wife should be able to live as equals. However, his views began to stir up social issues in Norway, and his writing soon became frowned upon. Norwegian critics constantly attacked him for not respecting the institution of marriage. After hearing enough from his harsh critics, Ibsen moved to Italy in 1864. From there, he lived abroad for the next 27 years. Significant historical context of this play included the fact that it was written during the realism literary movement. Realism portrays the reality of life, especially the life of the middle class. This movement was a rebellion against the Romantic movement. Also, the play is supposedly based off of the life of Ibsen's good friend Laura Kyler. She, just like Nora, signs an illegal loan in order to save her husband. Just like the play, she is drowned in the female sexism of society and is controlled by her husband. The main characters in A Dollhouse include Nora Helmer, Torvald's wife, who plays the part of the typical 19th century wife, Torvald Helmer, Nora's husband, who is a newly promoted bank manager, Dr. Rank, a rich family friend secretly in love with Nora, Christine Lind, Nora's widowed friend looking for unemployment, Krogstad, an employee at Torvald's bank, and Anne-Marie, Nora's nanny who cares for her 3 children. The basic plot overview for this play starts off with Nora taking out a secret loan in order to take her husband to Italy. She hopes to repay the loan before Torvald notices. Krogstad knows of Nora's illegal action and threatens Nora that he will tell Torvald the truth unless Nora helps him keep his job. Krogstad wants Nora to convince Torvald to let him stay. After a lot of commotion between Nora, her friend Lynn, and Krogstad, Torvald finds out about the loan. Enraged, Torvald harasses Nora with many disrespectful sayings and is ashamed of her. He belittles her and has zero sympathy towards her and her actions. That is, until Torvald sees that Krogstad sent back the evidence about the loan. Now that Torvald's reputation is saved, he expects Nora to come crawling back and apologizing. But instead, Nora realizes how mistreated she is and decides to leave for good. Today, A Doll's House can still relate to our society. Women are not nearly as domestic as they were back in the 19th century. However, females still live in a sexist society. Although modern sexism is much more minimal, it is still prevalent everywhere in today's society. 2 of the most prevalent themes in this play are materialism and gender inequality. Other themes pop up throughout the play too, such as love and marriage, reputation, and individual versus society.
The narrative technique is a limited third-person point of view. It is also called the limited omniscience, which means that the audience can hear the speech and see the action, but never learn any thoughts of the character. Ibsen's play focuses on the character, Nora, but only from an outsider's perspective, so we as audience cannot fully guess what the characters are thinking, but we can only assume and use our best guess. The way the play is written, the audience is likely to connect to Nora and try to understand her thoughts over other characters. It is basically not being told through the eyes of any single character. Characterization. This will help give an idea about the development of characters. I will talk about the 5 main characters in the play and a little bit about their story in the play. Nora Helmer. She's the protagonist. She's considered very ditzy in the play because her husband Torvald calls her Little Squirrel and his little lark, and she does not seem to mind at all. She really loves her husband, but at the end she has a realization that he does not respect her at all. She sees how prideful he is and that he only cares about his status and fortune more than he cares about her. Torvald Helmer is Nora's husband. He does not treat Nora like an equal human being. He treats Nora as a doll. He is very authoritative, both at home and at work. He has some strong pride issues that end up causing him problems because Nora leaves him. Next is Krogstad, who is the antagonist. He's an employee at Torvald's bank. Krogstad is Torvald's schoolmate, and they're not colleagues. Krogstad has a very contradictory personality. He blackmails Nora yet talks about how he can sympathize with her and her pain. Putting someone in the situation that Krogstad put Nora is not right. He seems to be easily influenced. He was also Mrs. Lind's lover back in the day. Mrs. Lind is Nora's childhood friend. She is a widow. She is a sensible person and has a good head in her shoulder. She's currently stuck in poverty and using Nora's help to get out of poverty by asking her for Torvald's help to get her a job at the bank. She asks for help when she needs it, and she helps Nora out at the end by saving her from Krogstad's blackmail, but she also helps Nora realize what kind of man Torvald truly is, which would be a blessing in disguise. Lastly, I'm going to talk about Dr. Rank, who is Torvald's best friend. He's not bothered about others' lives. He seems to be focused on his life. He talks about death pretty casually, which bugs the people around him. The next topic I will talk about is the use of language. The play was originally written in Norwegian and then translated into English for English-speaking audience. Ibsen chooses to use a very conversational way of language in the play. Nora's way of talking changes according to the person she is talking to. She will talk to her friend Lindy normally, but when it comes to her husband, she talks to him like a little kid. Nora's husband uses the word little as a metaphor a lot. It is very insensitive. A lot of the dialogues aren't said directly. There's a lot of very subtle hinting and implying instead of direct quoting.
The entire play is set in Helmer's living room. The living room is a tasteful middle-class room, and the setting is very generic, so it helps the audience relate to the Helmers. The family lives in Norway, and the set is typical for most suburban homes in Europe. At this time, there was a lot of influence from the Victorian time period, which was very strict. Women at this time were expected to take care of the house and do what their husbands said, while the male was the dominant figure of the household. You can tell that Nora is very submissive to her husband and basically acts like his doll for a majority of the play. If you think back to the play, you may be able to recognize some of the symbols mentioned frequently throughout the story. One of the symbols is the Helmer's family Christmas tree. Not only is the tree a symbol of the upcoming holiday, it also represents Nora's psychological state of mind. In the play, the tree is described as disheveled, and so is Nora's mind. She is so focused on covering up her lies that she seems to be scatterbrained. Nora dressed up the tree with ornaments and such so that she could cover up the tree and make it beautiful, just as Torvald dresses up Nora for the party. Nora also tells the maid that she does not want the children to see the Christmas tree until it is decorated, and she tells Torvald that she can't be seen until her costume until the party. You can clearly see the resemblance with the tree and Nora's actions and attitude. Torvald believes that his wife is a perfect doll that will do anything to please him, but sometimes Nora will show her rebellious side, or the side where she doesn't always do what her loving husband wants. The macaroons she eats are a symbol of her rebellious attitude against her husband. Torvald does not like that she spends money on macaroons, and when he tells her that he does not want her eating them, she sneaks them behind his back. When Nora eats the macaroons, it shows that she is not as perfect as Torvald thinks she is. Eating the macaroons represents Nora's rebellious and disobedient side. Torvald refers to Nora as his bird, and by calling her animal names, he is dehumanizing her. Birds are in cages and are only meant to look pretty, which is how Nora is portrayed in the play. Torvald just treats his wife as an object and thinks that he can just mold her into whatever he wants her to be. Torvald refers to Nora as a hunted dove that he will protect from a hawk's claw. He is saying that it is his job as the man to always protect her, and she is just a helpless bird that he must save from trouble. When Nora gets home from shopping, she shows Torvald what she bought her children for Christmas. She shows him the dolls that she bought for her daughter and mentions that it was cheap and that she will probably end up breaking them eventually. This is foreshadowing that Nora will eventually break up the family by leaving Torvald. Also, Nora tells Torvald that him and her father treated her like a doll, which is why she is so dissatisfied with her life. The doll represents Nora in a way, and how people just try and mold her into who they want her to be. Heinrik Ibsen uses a realistic style where characters talk in everyday speech. But Ibsen also incorporates some other unrealistic elements, such as the doorbell ringing at convenient times, which usually means some type of trouble is coming for Nora. Ibsen also has characters enter and exit when he needs to introduce a new idea or changing the scene. This is an effective way of moving the scenes along and introducing new events. Many people believe that Ibsen was the founder of realistic drama.
For a second, put yourself in the shoes of Nora, and then in the shoes of Torvald. These two characters live two completely different lives. One lives the life of a woman in the 19th century, and the other the life of a typical well-off man in the late 19th century. Gender roles are very much present in the play. The characters are pretty much trapped by them. This goes for both genders. It isn't until the end of the play that those roles are challenged, making things quite interesting. In the play, men are supposed to be the providers and carry the burden of supporting the household. Torvald never consults her on matters of any importance and leaves almost no responsibility to her. All of this, he says, was likely that I would be continually telling you about worries that you couldn't help me with. Even in the motherly aspect, Nora is given no responsibility whatsoever. Also, Torvald doesn't allow Nora to prosper as her own person. Regarding Nora, just like any other late 19th century wife, is dependent on her husband to survive. The male dominance of society in this time period stops Nora from having a job or any other privilege outside of housework and childcare. Nora is more of a possession and an amusement than a companion to her husband. Nora appeared to be the perfect model of a 19th century homemaker. Women are supposed to love their husbands and children in the 19th century. This would explain why Nora is so loving towards Torvald and even borrows money for the life-saving trip that would later cause a lot of trouble for her. In the end, Nora is seen as neglecting her most sacred duties by leaving the ones that she loves, her husband and her children. But most importantly, by leaving these obligations, she follows her most sacred duty to herself. Now, I'm really into feminism, so I'm always looking at things through a feminist criticism lens. But this one wasn't too hard to do that. Did you know that Nora has often been seen as one of modern drama's first feminist heroines? I mean, it makes sense. Over the course of the play, she breaks away from the domination of her overbearing husband, Torvald. This is an example of her breaking away from the norms of the patriarchal society. The playwright Heinrik Ibsen denied that he had intentionally written a feminist play, preferring to think of it as humanistic. Still, though, throughout this drama, there is a constant talk of women, their traditional roles, and the price of them breaking with tradition, all of which is typical for feminist plays and as well as ancient Greek plays. Nora has been suppressed and was always who others wanted her to be her entire life, allowing every man to define who she is. This realization and desire to leave the situation is what makes this a feminist play. Ibsen, knowingly or unknowingly, gave women fictional and a true voice. Realism was key, as we discussed earlier on, and it was used to make a clearer picture of what was going on in the play and make it seem as though this could really happen. This play was one of the first works of drama to be seriously taken on a modern social issues from a realistic perspective. The play was shocking to many because it painted characters and situations that would be in real life, a realistic feel. These events could happen to anyone. A Doll's House. The play isn't about dolls or their dollhouse, or is it? If you take a closer look at see that indeed it is a play about real-life dolls living in their real-life house. The dollhouse was the Helmer house, and its dolls were Nora and the children. The creators or owners of the dolls were Torvald and Nora's deceased father. Nora is trapped in the perfect life Torvald thinks he has given her, aka the dollhouse. By the end, Nora is done playing pretend. She is done playing the role of the doll.
The first of two major themes I'll be discussing is the idea of materialism, or more specifically in the case of A Doll's House, money. Money is, in essence, close to everything in this play. It's what maintains relationships while having the immediate power to destroy them. It's what gets Nora tangled in a mess of lies for the sake of her pride, what pushes Krogstad to desperation, and what Torvald uses to define himself as a runner-up to his honor and good name. In the play, however, the emphasis is mostly on Nora when it comes to the idea of materialism. All along, it is Nora who is playfully accused of being a spendthrift, and we do see her being exceedingly excited and motivated by some good old fold-in money. Of course, this doesn't make Nora look good as a character, as materialism is seen as a negative thing, and it ends up making her appear more superficial with a lack of real values. But in this day and age, can we all claim to be unfazed by money and other material possessions and so better than Nora? And while thinking about that, think about how you'd feel playing a hypothetical round of Deal or No Deal, seeing the contestants before you getting money and iPads, and you getting a piece of paper that says self-respect. Now, if we're being honest, what's a piece of paper saying self-respect compared to much more glamorous things like money and Apple products? Understand that it's important to prioritize your values while also accepting that materialism is sometimes unavoidable. So in relation to A Doll's House, it's a metaphor for Nora's values. Think about which prize she would choose at the beginning and the end of the play, thinking about her opportunities and what she wants. Would they be different? From the shift that we see in the last scene with her, I should think so. We now move on to another theme that embodies a huge part of the play, gender inequality. There's a lot of talk from analysts saying that A Doll's House heavily involves and represents feminism, as we see some symbols that work against and so emphasize feminism, and we also see Nora transform into the beginnings of a feminist at the end of the play. But feminism arose as a response to sexism in history, and it follows that same order in the play. But something to think about. Sexism and feminism are very closely entangled, so let's look at them as such. What do each of the terms mean? What positive or negative connotations are associated with each? And is there any possibility of the two being confused and misinterpreted? Now, I'm not making a personal argument for either end of this debate, but I am pointing out that an often heard view in today's society relating to the idea of feminism is that it is confused with sexism. And I do believe that it's important to be aware of all the crazy new ideas people are coming up with. Nowadays, some folks are worried that feminism itself is becoming controversial, and that it's being confused with man-hating, rather than the female empowerment working toward the eventual equality of the sexes. And I'm aware this tends to be a hot-button topic, so hopefully all you listening have some 2 cents on this. Keeping all this in mind, I'd like you to think back to the final scene of the play, where Nora ends up leaving Torvald. I'm going to ask a 2-parted question I'd like you to really think about. By the end of A Doll's House, whose side are you on? If you're on Nora's, is it due to the sneaky effects of feminism or male-targeted sexism? In other words, for the Nora supporters, are we rooting for Nora solely because she's making choices to better herself and to be more independent? Or are we absent-mindedly rooting for her simply because we like to see the demise of the formerly dominant male figure? Because we know from history that the female sex eventually overcomes this particular extreme in gender inequality, and because of that, the character of Torvald just pisses us off for reasons that he won't understand for decades because it was a different time. Or could it be both? And of course, there's the option of not rooting for Nora at all, which is very well justified as well. But the Too Long Didn't Listen version, who do you like better, Nora or Torvald? Or neither? Or the small children? Or the dying doctor who totally almost got some? Thank you for listening and letting us talk at you. We hope that this CultureCast has informed you to a satisfactory level and entertained you to at least an adequate one. More information on A Doll's House can be found on the internet. So from all of us, good day and have a pleasant tomorrow.